Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yang Yun Kyu, and I work as a principal scientist at Korea Drug Development Fund. Today, I would like to talk about the overview of COVID-19 vaccines and treatments in Korea and abroad, and I would also like to make some suggestions. First and foremost, let me update you on COVID vaccines list. So currently, 4 vaccinations were approved in Korea, and in the US, 3 were approved. So I would say worldwide, 15 vaccines were approved globally. And as you know, COVID-19 vaccination can be classified into mRNA, viral vector, and also inactivated vaccination, and lastly, protein-based vaccine. For mRNA vaccines, there is Pfizer and BioNTech vaccination, and the other is Moderna. And for viral vector vaccination, there's Johnson and Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccination as well. And currently, these 4 vaccine options are offered in the Korean market. And in Korea, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson were approved by FDA. Aside from this, there's Sinopharm and Sputnik, the Russian vaccination, Sinovac and CanSino, and Sinopharm and Sinovac are considered inactivated vaccination. The most widely used form, which is mRNA, has a limit because it takes a while to produce. However, because Nova vaccine is going to be approved, likely to be approved within this year, and because Sinovac is going to come to the market in the later part of this year, I'm expecting the prevalence of vaccination being offered to Koreans. And now let's move on to the clinical trial landscape. Whether fully approved or partially approved, I would say there are 15 different options worldwide. And there are 50 vaccines going through phase 1 and about 30 vaccines going through phase 3. So all in all, I would say about 200 or so vaccinations are being tested clinically. And even though authorized vaccines are only 15 in number, I would say there are at least 77 principal vaccinations that are under active investigation. So, as you can see, vaccines are being developed. And why do we have to continue the development going forward? You might ask this question. But I would say the main answer for this is that the demand for vaccination is much stronger than its supply, and especially thinking about emerging economies, the demand for vaccination is going to grow in the future. So there is definitely a need for us to develop vaccination further, and for the mutation, we need to be respond to it. For the variants, I'm going to talk about it later in the later part of my presentation. And now let's move on to the development landscape of a COVID vaccination in Korea. There are 5 companies that are going through clinical tests. There's Genexine, Genome Life Sciences that are developing DNA vaccine. And for a viral vector, there's Cellead. And also for SK Bioscience and U Biologics, who are developing recombinant protein vaccine. Aside from this, HK Inno and Curatis is developing recombinant and mRNA vaccination. In Korea, mRNA, I would say it is still in the early stage of development. Now let me update you on the variant and mutation status. There is a US mutation and Brazil mutation, and many different interesting variants are appearing worldwide, and there is another appearance in Vietnam as well. This is an ongoing trend that we have to look at. Aside from this, you can see Pfizer, AstraZeneca. You have to look at whether these remaining vaccination is going to be still effective for variants. There are vaccinations that are still effective, but there are vaccination types that are not effectively targeting variants. It's not just one type or one option or variant. You have to monitor depending on types of vaccination, the efficacy rate fluctuates, meaning we need to focus on further development of other vaccinations. So you can see current developers are responding to the variants, and Moderna and Janssen, they are doing development for booster shots to effectively respond to variants. And if you think about Pfizer, what they're doing is that they have evidence that can prove that it can effectively handle variants as well. But because variants are going to keep appearing in the future, they will have to continue their effort. And AstraZeneca said that they're going to come up with an antibody that's going to respond to the variant within this year. And in our team, we would like to make some suggestions for vaccine developments in the future. From the second part of this year, second half of this year, I think the developments are going to hit the clinical stage. And of course, depending on manufacturer, it is going to go through different phases, but their targets and goals are going through and hitting phase two and phase three in the second half. So we are going to have to cherry pick some of the promising projects, for example, 2 to 3 projects, by securing the data for so far, and then we'll compare how efficient it'll be as it was combined with existing options. And by doing this evaluation, we will be able to choose more likely and effective vaccination to provide necessary support. And after these projects are chosen, of course, we will support that clinical phase three can end successfully. And for a fast adoption and fast development, we need to adopt these strategies. But at the same time, our team and our center also supports non-clinical field as well. Even though we're going through an initial stage, the main aim and goal for the COVID support project is that number one is whether it can effectively respond to variants, and number two is how we are going to make it into endemic. And also, number three is, let's say another round or wave of pandemic hits, how we're going to successfully respond to it. Number one, we have to focus on having technologies to respond to various variants. And if there's another round of pandemic, whether we're going to secure resources for that or not is another objective. And number three, we have to make sure that we develop fundamental technologies and equipment so that we can prepare for different possibilities and chances. And we would like to secure new technologies and labs and R&D centers and universities so that they can work on future responses. And another thing I would like to mention is with the companies that have technologies. And also, you have to think about manufacturers. By creating consortium between technology holders and manufacturing technology holders, we have to expedite the commercialization of new vaccinations. This is what I would like to emphasize. In order to go to the global market, they need support, and we're going to support it. And even though, let's say, a company has a fundamental or base science technology, they might have a difficulty commercializing those technologies. So, by providing an opportunity to create a consortium with other companies, they can quickly and expedite the process of commercialization, and this is a strategy going forward. And next, I want to talk about some of the treatment options. As for COVID-19 treatment options, if you look at some of the options suggested for antiviral segment, remdesivir is the only approved treatment. Remdesivir, if you look at the efficacy, there is some controversy over whether it is actually effective or not. And if you think about other medicinal options, they are being developed, but you can see that some of them are not going very smoothly, but others are going through clinical tests as well. Now, let me move on to the immunomodulatory agents, and the most representative would be dexamethasone. Of course, this one has many advantages, but there is a clear limitation because it's an immune steroidal side effects. There are many different materials that are going through immuno technologies, but I would say even immunomodulatory agents are not recording great success when it comes to proving its efficacy. And I would say the most developed option will be monoclonal antibody treatment. As you know, Eli Lilly or Regeneron, these are the ones that received EUA in the US for high risk patients. But in the case of monoclonal antibody treatment, if you think about its nature, when variants appear, it is difficult to apply them with the same efficacy. So what we currently do is we use IV in vitro method to inject this treatment material, and we can only use it to limited patient groups. That would be the main limitation that this antibody treatment option has. And again, other options are being developed in the monoclonal antibody segment as well. And next, moving on to hyperimmune globulin and also convalescent plasma. When it was first launched, people have expected that there is going to be a great result, but as of now, I think this is not going very smoothly. Hyperimmune globulin's expectation has been dropped significantly. And now let's go back to the treatment options being developed in Korea. Zeltrian received a partial approval, conditional approval in Korea, and now it's going through clinical phase 3. And Daeung offered two options, and Chonggundang CKD Pharmaceuticals also suggested an option. And these are a reproduction method. And Shinpung, Donghua, and Pogwang, and about 40 different pipelines were generated and now are going through clinical test phases. But what is unfortunate is that antiviral products were not approved so far, and also for novel drugs, only Kirona is the only option that was approved by KFDA. And now let's move on to the development product trends. If you think about July last year, to tackle new COVID coronavirus 19, there were materials that were targeting only coronavirus. So more than 50%, about 53% of materials were targeting only coronavirus, and redirected ones were about 27%. But if you think about what is happening this year, antiviral active materials, the new projects, are about 70%. Meaning, like the projects that are targeting this coronavirus itself is growing, whereas re-proposed or redirect projects are reducing in number. So if you think about COVID-19 treatment development trends all around the world based on scientific and technological elements, we are focusing on developing a new material that can specifically target COVID-19. So these COVID-19 targeting materials are about 30 in terms of its number. Of course, these types also include treatments, but mostly it's antibody or protein recombination. Many different approaches are taken. And now I want to talk about some strategies that our center is focusing on. Just like treatment options, there is urgent use, purpose, and more mid and long term based approvals. So for the urgent approved ones, we need to think about the usage of combination therapy. There are available options in the market. And then by co-injecting both the available options and the new vaccination, we can develop strategies, and this can be accompanied by a joint R&D project, and cooperation methods could be invented. And another thing is for COVID-19, and depending on the severity of COVID-19, for example, mild or moderate or severe patients, you can have different portfolios for different groups. So we need to have a strategy to segment those portfolios. And another strategy for treatments that I would like to talk to you today is, of course, whether we have to look at whether it can respond to variants, and number two, whether it can prevent next wave of a pandemic, and also another part would be responding to endemic situation. We need to identify new materials for variant response, and number two, we need to identify new materials for other rounds of pandemics in the future that'll be a different kind from COVID-19. And again, in order for us to complete these strategies, we need basic and fundamental research projects. We need to create a support system so that we create an environment where a number of diverse research and studies are being carried out. So this is everything from me. Thank you very much for your attention.